Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Dragon Prince Yuan Season 2 episode number 16 based on novel. So let's start. An endless torrent rushed down the long stone steps. There were now only 10 figures on it. Every one of them was an apex-level genius. It was only because of their strong solid foundations that enabled them to last till now. On the 5th stone platform, Luluo and Zhu had chosen to enter and vie for its blessing, while everyone continued to push forward with all their strength. However, anyone could see that even these apex-level geniuses were beginning to tire, their footsteps growing heavier and slower. From the looks of it, someone will stay behind on every subsequent platform. Outside the Saint Remains domain. The numerous gazes that saw this scene understood that the climax was imminent. Every subsequent platform would be occupied, and likely by more than one individual. In other words, bitter battle after battle for the blessings on the stone platforms was soon to erupt. The Dongxian rats dare to secretly sneak into our Kangman continent and steal our blessings. How hateful! The various faction representatives outside the Saint Remains domain were outraged upon realizing the identities of Yiming and Gang. They looked towards the 6 envoys in the sky, but realized that they were not going to say anything. Hence, the representatives could only helplessly cease their curses, since there was no way they could throw Yiming and Gang out of the Saint Remains domain at this time. If those Dongxian people are smart enough, they will allocate one person to each of the subsequent stone platforms, such as to prevent a scenario of fighting amongst themselves. Some of the more intelligent individuals were able to clearly understand the current situation. When that happens, the battle for the blessings would become a contest between our Kangman continent and the Dongxian continent. There were numerous continents within Sangshuan Heaven, including the Kangman and Dongxian continents. If these Dongxian geniuses managed to travel all the way to the Kangman continent and snatch away the blessings here, the Kangman continent would definitely be humiliated. Others would surely say that there were no capable people in the Kangman continent. Matters that affected everyone's face were not to be brushed off. After all, no one wanted to be seen as useless when meeting those from other continents. I hope that the remaining apex-level geniuses will be able to stop those Dongxian geniuses and secure the blessings for our Kangman continent. Under the attention of countless gazes, the 6th stone platform finally made its appearance. Yiming's narrowed slightly as he gazed at the floating stone platform nearby. After a brief silence, he made a hand gesture towards the remaining Dongxian members behind him. Including Yiming, there were still 4 geniuses remaining from the Dongxian continent. When they saw Yiming's hand gesture, they understood his intentions. He wanted them to give their all for the following few blessings on the stone platforms. The youth called Jiang Quan spit onto the ground. Soon after, his toes powerfully pushed off, blue Genesis chi akin to flowing water under his feet, sending him towards the 6th stone platform. He clearly no longer planned on advancing, choosing instead to take the blessing on the 6th stone platform. Zhu Yuan and the rest naturally saw this. In that split second, with the exception of the seemingly uncaring Wu Huang, the rest of the geniuses exchanged a look. Allow me to go for this 6th stone platform. A rather gloomy and raspy voice sounded. The one who had spoken was Jun Shu. The others were silent for a moment, before they nodded. I hope that the rest of you will work harder, and don't let the Dongxian people take away the blessings. Or others will laugh at our Kangman continent's younger generation, and say all of us are trash. After finishing, Jun Shu's toes pushed off the ground, his figure dashing into the flood before landing on the 6th stone platform. Spineless rat, you didn't even have the courage to take me on alone previously. Who will help you this time? Jun Shu's frosty gaze was cast towards Jiang Quan, as a cold ruthless look flashed in his eyes. In their previous fight, Jiang Quan's companions had been nearby watching in secret. As a result, Jun Shu did not dare to use his full power, allowing Jiang Quan to take advantage. Jun Shu had been waiting for payback for a long time. Not long after the appearance of the 6th stone platform, the 7th also emerged. This time, Zhuo Qingyu took the initiative. Green light flashed as she landed on the platform, before looking towards the last 3 Dongxian geniuses. Who intends to challenge me for this blessing? Yiming's expression was indifferent as he looked towards the muscular metal tower-like youth. The latter's body seemed as if it had been forged from metal, and gave off an aura of brutalness. Qin Tong, you're up. The metal body youth nodded. His foot slammed into the ground, sending him soaring in the air. He landed on the 7th stone platform, and looked towards Zhuqiuqingyu with a savage smile. What a bewitching little beauty. All of the women I've toyed with over the years ended up dying pretty quickly. Will you be able to hold up? Disgust flitted across Zhuqiuqingyu's eyes, but the smile on her enchanting face only grew increasingly sweeter. Won't you know once you try? You big clumsy bull. The flood continued to surge downwards. However, the countless watching gazes had become rather tense at this moment as they stared at the last 6 figures on the stone steps. I wonder who will be entering the 8th platform. It will likely be Zhu Yuan. It's already unimaginable for him to have lasted so long. He should likely be at his limit, right? Who amongst the rest is not the cream of the crop even amongst the apex-level geniuses? Wu Huang, Lu Chunjun, Ning Zhon, all of them should last longer than Zhu Yuan. Countless whispers rang out. High up in the sky above the Saint Remains domain, Mu Wuji frowned a little as he stared at Zhu Yuan's figure. The latter's Genesis Chi did indeed appear the weakest amongst the remaining 6. Zhu Yuan is after all only a Heaven Gate stage practitioner. Although his high-grade Chi dwelling had given him more Genesis Chi than ordinary Alpha Origin experts, the remaining few were truly top-tier even amongst the best of them. They were likewise very talented, and the grade of the Chi dwelling was definitely nowhere near the low side. Compared to them, Zhu Yuan is at a disadvantage. Mu Wuji sighed in his heart. He knew that the green flood was a test of the amount and recovery rate of one's Genesis Chi. For the mere Heaven Gate stage Zhu Yuan, this was clearly unfavorable. It's not easy for him to reach this stage. Mu Wuji knew that Zhu Yuan was not to blame. However, at this rate, Zhu Yuan would soon lose the right to continue. This was something Mu Wuji felt was extremely regretful. Zhu Yuan was naturally unaware of the discussions in the outside world, but he understood his current condition. The Genesis Chi around him had grown much weaker. After all, the consumption along the way here had been far too great. In fact, his Genesis Chi recovery was sometimes unable to keep up despite him using the Dragon Breath technique. However, determination still filled Zhu Yuan's eyes as he focused every fiber of his being. It was as if the only thing in his eyes was the green flood. He was not willing to give up so easily here. A roar seemed to echo in his heart. The world turned silent at this moment, his rapid breathing the only sound echoing in his head. Asterisk inhale asterisk. Asterisk exhale asterisk. In this split-second moment, his breathing became even more drawn out. Unbeknownst to even himself, there was now an extremely faint roar of a dragon mixed in with his breathing. The Genesis Chi around Zhu Yuan rippled slightly, before endlessly flowing towards his nose, transforming into strands of white that rushed in through his nostrils. This is... Zhu Yuan finally detected something as his heart began to tremble. He had realized that every breath he took contained the power of a dragon's breath that could endlessly suck in Genesis Chi from the surroundings. Zhu Yuan mumbled to himself in shock, my proficiency in the dragon breath technique seems to have grown. At the very beginning, Zhu Yuan needed to perform an entire set of frolicking dragon forms in order to use a single breath of the dragon breath technique. As his mastery grew, he no longer required the frolicking dragon forms, and could activate dragon breath through the movement of his bones, a more convenient and faster method compared to before. However, the true advanced level of the dragon breath technique was to perfectly harmonize with one's breathing, allowing every breath to transform into a dragon's breath that could effortlessly take in Genesis Chi. In the past, Zhu Yuan had been unable to achieve this feat, but he had now finally came into contact with it due to the pressure from the green flood. Although he had yet to achieve perfection, the effectiveness of the technique was already several times greater than before. Asterisk breathe asterisk. Zhu Yuan continued to breathe as the surrounding Genesis Chi endlessly surged over, transforming into a white mist that was rapidly sucked in by him. As this process continued, his originally somewhat feeble Genesis Chi slowly began to brighten and grow robust again. His speed abruptly increased, step after step flying past under his feet. In a single leap, his position rose from the last amongst the 6 to stand shoulder to shoulder with Wu Huang, Yi Ming, Li Chunjun and the rest. These changes were immediately discovered by the rest of them, causing them to be startled. They had originally believed that Zhu Yuan would be the next to yield. Who could have imagined that such a change would suddenly occur? A dark look flitted across Wu Huang's face, the killing intent in his eyes growing thicker and thicker. He could feel that Zhu Yuan was becoming more and more of a threat. The instant Zhu Yuan came to stand side by side with those at the very front, wave after wave of noise exploded outside the Saint Remains domain, the expressions of countless people changing slightly. They were unable to comprehend how the clearly nearly spent Zhu Yuan had suddenly become so lively and energetic. He had not fallen behind even further, but had instead rose to be on the same level as Wu Huang and the rest. One must know that at the end of the day, Zhu Yuan was still only a Heaven Gate stage expert, while Wu Huang and the rest were bona fide Alpha Origin practitioners. The gap between these two levels was not small. And yet, Zhu Yuan had still managed to catch up. How could anyone not be surprised? Outside the Saint Remains domain, Mu Wuji was somewhat astonished when he saw this scene and mumbled to himself, "This kid seems to have mastered some kind of high-level qi drawing method." His sharp eyes had seen through Zhu Yuan in a single glance. Zhu Yuan's Genesis qi was being rapidly replenished. Such speed could only be attributed to a high-class qi drawing method. But at least he has managed to push on. Mu Wuji chuckled, drawing in a breath of smoke as it puffed from his nose, causing smoke to pervade the area. He then looked towards the sacred sect envoy, Zhao Pan. The latter was currently expressionless, as he stared at the mirror. However, from the twitching corners of his eyes, the former knew that he was not as calm as he seemed on the surface. Looks like this kid will really become a black horse. Mu Wuji's mouth cracked open into a smile. Old Mister's eyes were really one of a kind. Not long after Zhu Yuan burst of speed that put him on the same line with Huang, Yiming and the other top-class geniuses, the 8th platform appeared within their sights. Yiming's gaze shot towards the final Dongxian member still following behind him. It was a white-haired youth with a frigid face. However, from the robustness and quantity of the Genesis qi spreading from his body, he was clearly stronger than Zhu Ying and the rest. "Fang Zong, you're up." The white-haired youth did not reply. His toes pushed off the ground, his body like phantom as it appeared on the stone platform. His indifferent eyes looked towards Zhu Yuan, Li Chunjun and Ning Zhan as he said, "Who will fight me for the blessing on this stone platform?" The gazes of the Zhu Yuan trio met, before Li Chunjun slowly suggested, "The one with the weakest Genesis qi now shall go, any opinions?" Ning Zhan awkwardly scratched his head and looked towards Zhu Yuan. His Genesis qi had originally been the weakest, but after the previous change, the latter's Genesis qi was still going strong. As such, Ning Zhan was now just that slight bit weaker. "I really wanted to fight Wu Huang again, never expected that I'll have to stop here." Ning Zhan smiled helplessly. Soon after, his wild battle-lust-filled eyes burned passionately as they were cast towards the whitey-haired youth. "But this guy looks like he'll put up a pretty good fight. I hope that I'll be able to enjoy this. Hey, you there, the one called Zhu Yuan. If you get matched up with Wu Huang, give him a good beating for me." Ning Zhan yelled at Zhu Yuan before charging forward. With a loud boom, he landed on the 8th stone platform like a cannonball. Zhu Yuan gave a slight nod as he gazed upon the former's figure. As Ning Zhan and Fang Zong entered the 8th platform, only the figures of Zhu Yuan, Wu Huang, Yiming and Li Chunjun were left on the stone steps. These four were this batch's best and finest. Countless gazes blazed with excitement as they watched. The stone steps challenge was clearly growing more and more intense and amazing. What they were most curious about, however, was which two apex geniuses would be VYNG on the 9th platform. Countless gazes both inside and outside of the Saint Remains domain eagerly watched, causing the entire place to become silent. A short dozen minutes stealthily passed by in this silence. It's appeared. The 9th stone platform has appeared. Countless cries suddenly filled the sky, breaking the silence. Gaze after gaze looked over, and sure enough, they saw a stone platform floating some distance to the front. It was the final stone platform on the Saint Stairs. Once they passed this platform, they would soon reach the peak of the Saint Mountain where they would be able to obtain the greatest blessing. At this very moment, practically every gaze began to burn even hotter than before, no one daring to even blink. They weren't the only ones, of course. Even the hearts of Zhu Yuan and the other three began to thump when they saw the 9th stone platform, faintly feeling as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders. Because the appearance of the 9th platform meant that they were about to reach the end of these saint steps. Boom. However, the moment the four breathed a sigh of relief in their hearts, the entire stairs suddenly began to tremble. Horror surged onto their faces as they saw the green flood above begin to gather, forming a giant green wave that continued to rise higher and higher. In a short few breaths, the giant green wave had reached a height of over 10,000 feet. The wave was filled with berserk Genesis Chi, the terrible power within unmatched by anything from before. God damn it. In the face of such a huge wave, even the Zhu Yuan quartet could not help but curse. Rumble. However, the 10,000 feet wave cared naught for their cursing. With a violent shudder, it crashed down towards the four of them with vast, unimaginable power. From its overwhelming presence, it was certain that anything that stood in its way would be destroyed. The four took in a deep breath, before dashing forward a split second later. They understood that this was the final obstacle. Once they passed through, it would definitely be the peak. Wu Huang yelled as scarlet-red Genesis Chi whizzed out behind him, transforming into a rising giant scarlet-red sun. In the sun, one could faintly see a three-legged golden crow. Lu Chunjun wielded his black broadsword, man and sword as one as they shot forward like a flash of sword light. The vortexes in Yiming's eyes swirled, black Genesis Chi converging towards his palms, rapidly growing as it transformed into black vortexes, placed defensively in front of him. Zhu Yuan released a long howl, as the Genesis Chi in his Chi dwelling exploded forth without reservation. Dark gold Genesis Chi seemed to form the silhouette of a giant golden python. The python swallowed Zhu Yuan into its giant mouth, before charging forward with a wave of its tail. Rumble. The four figures had drawn out every last bit of their power. Under countless watching eyes, they crashed head-on against the 10,000 feet tall wave. The entire Saint Stairs seemed to shudder slightly. Berserk shockwaves frantically devastated the area. Every gaze was glued to the four figures. They charged into the wave, breaking through it inch by inch as if going to penetrate its entirety. Everyone knew what awaited them after this 10,000 feet wave, the peak of Saint Mountain. But, who was going to be the one? In this very moment, everyone both inside and outside of the Saint Remains domain did not even dare to breath. Zhao Pan's eyes were wide open as he stared. Mu Wuji even forgot to puff his pipe, all their gazes tightly fixed on the mirror. Everyone wanted to know who would be the final winner of this intense battle. The green wave churned, bursting with power that could sweep away mountains and overturn the seas. 10,000 feet tall, the sight of it could only be said to be magnificent. However, everyone clearly knew of the terror within such magnificence. At this current moment, there were four figures inside this giant wave. These four were using all of their power to frantically push through every layer in the wave. They wanted to pierce through the wave, blasting past this final obstruction. Every gaze both inside and outside the Saint Remains domain was gathered on the four figures. The four of them seemed to have pushed their Genesis Chi to the limit. However, anyone could see that the final green wave contained way too much power so great that the four individuals were extremely serious expressions, and did not dare to let their attention stray. In a short span of a dozen breaths, they were nearly at the halfway point in the wave. Outside the Saint Remains domain, one of the 6 envoys suddenly remarked, "They're about to run out of steam." Mu Wuji and Zhao Pan's pupils shrank. They were also naturally able to sense that Zhu Yuan, Wu Huang and the other two were swiftly depleting their Genesis Chi. It was obvious that even they felt a huge pressure from the 10,000 feet tall green wave. The Saint Mountain is indeed difficult to climb. Another envoy sighed. From the looks of it, I'm afraid that the four of them will have no choice but to land on the 9th stone platform. If they chose the 9th stone platform, they would be unable to reach the peak, and no longer be able to obtain the greatest blessing. The envoys' gazes were tightly glued to the mirror. They knew that result was about to appear. Not good. In the green wave, Yiming's brows were tightly furrowed together, his expression rather grim. He was aware of his rapidly depleting Genesis Chi, and knew that he would not be able to pass the green wave if this continued. Li Chuanjuan's expression was still akin to a ripple as well. However, the destructive power of his sword Chi had clearly become much weaker. Wu Huang and Zhu Yuan were also giving their all with grave expressions. Another dozen breaths passed in this manner. The black vortex in front of Yiming suddenly paused, a sign that it was about to crumble, while Lu Chunjun was forcibly battered out of his man and sword as one state. Zhu Yuan and Wu Huang's speed also dropped. Countless sighs of pity rang out in the Saint Remains domain at this moment. Boom. However, just as everyone felt the four were no longer able to push forward, Berserk Genesis Chi suddenly erupted from Wu Huang's body as the giant scarlet-red sun before him exploded. By borrowing this sudden explosion of power, Wu Huang's speed soared. Uproar. Uproar swept through the insides and outsides of the Saint Remains domain. No one had that Wu Huang had still been holding something back. Excellent. The Sacred Palace envoy Zhao Pan laughed heartily. On the other hand, Mu Wujis frowned deeply. Yi Ming and Li Chunjun were also startled by Wu Huang's sudden burst of power. Especially Yi Ming, a dark look flitting across his eyes. Wu Huang, since we can be said to be companions, we should naturally go through thick and thin together. Abandoning me as you ascend the peak is definitely a no-go. That's why, it will be better for you to stay here and keep me company. Yi Ming icily chuckled as he suddenly made his move. With a jerk of his sleeve, black Genesis Chi shot out, transforming into a black spear that thrust towards Wu Huang like lightning. The black spear pierced through the air, clearly containing Yi Ming's full power. Since he could not reach the peak, no one else should reach it. What a vicious person. Yi Ming's sudden attack drew countless gasps. No one had expected that the one to attack Wu Huang would be the one he partnered with. The black spear arrived like a bolt of lightning, instantly appearing behind Wu Huang. However, instead of being alarmed by the sudden attack, a strange smile surfaced on Wu Huang's face. One could only watch as his body paused slightly and his hands began to make circular motions. Scarlet-red Genesis Chi began to swirl, causing the black spear to stop. With a twist of his hand, the black spear ferociously shot towards the front with even more power than before. Wu Huang's figure leaped onto the spear, stepping on its body as it rapidly pierced through the green wave. Yi Ming, did you really think I would not be on guard against someone as devious as you? Wu Huang's laughter was heard as he left on the spear. Yi Ming's expression was stormy. He had never imagined that Wu Huang would already be prepared. He had purposely shown an opening, baiting the former to attack such that he could borrow the former's power to travel through the wave. And now, Yi Ming's strength was spent, no longer able to advance even half a step forward. Beautiful. Countless exclamations sounded in the Saint Remains domain. No one had expected Wu Huang would end up using Yi Ming's attack to help him progress. Looks like Wu Huang will be the only one to ascend the peak of the Saint Mountain. Zhao Pan rubbed his hands together as he laughed loudly. He shot Mu Wuji a glance from the corner of his eye, a mocking look on his lips. Zhu Yuan, Li Chunjun and Yi Ming were already on their last legs. It was impossible for them to break through the final green wave and reach the top of the mountain. Inside the green wave, Zhu Yuan's eyes began to flicker in thought as he gazed upon Wu Huang's rapidly departing figure atop the spear. Soon after, the former took in a deep breath. To think that you still had something in reserve even at such a time. Wu Huang, you are really extraordinary. However, if you believe this will cement your victory, you're taking things too easy. Resplendent rays of light suddenly emerged between Zhu Yuan's brows as a spirit pulse exploded. His Genesis Chi had indeed been depleted, but one cannot forget that Genesis Chi was not the only thing he relied on. In fact, his spirit mastery was greater than anyone here. An illusory spirit was faintly visible, silently seated between Zhu Yuan's brows. Rumble. Genesis Chi returned to his body, but it was now surrounded by a powerful invisible force. The green wave was continuously torn apart as his figure dashed forward, chasing after Wu Huang. The invisible force was obvious spirit power. Zhu Yuan's sudden burst of speed immediately drew countless shocked gazes. Zhu Yuan still has Genesis Chi. No, that's not Genesis Chi, it's spirit power. So that's how he did it. His spirit cultivation is pretty high, but he has not used it since the beginning because now is the best timing. Wave after wave of noise pulsed through the crowds, countless individuals amazed. Who could have imagined such a series of highs and lows? Even till now, no one was able to say for sure who will be the final winner. Zhu Yuan shot forward, slicing through the green wave. Lu Chuanjuan's footsteps stopped at this moment as he measured the remaining power in his body. He then shot a look at Zhu Yuan, and was silent for a brief moment, before tightly gripping his heavy black sword. Zhu Yuan, I will send you off. I hope that you will reach the peak. Li Chunjun grasped his sword with both hands, and suddenly sent a slash flying. A formidable without equal flash of sword light rocketed forward, appearing in front of Zhu Yuan to help him cut through the green wave. Zhu Yuan was a little taken aback. He soon cast a grateful gaze at Li Chunjun. With Li Chuanjuan's aid, he was now confident of passing through the entire wave and ascend the peak. Thanks. With a soft thanks, his speed rapidly rose. Several breaths later, he was already at Wu Huang's heels. Wu Huang looked over, their gazes meeting. The thick killing intent could practically freeze the surrounding air. Zhu Yuan, You really are akin to a lingering spirit. Wu Huang's voice was chilling. He never imagined that the crippled dragon of the Zhu clan, whom he would not even give a glance, would one day be right at his heels. Wu Huang, let us fully settle our grudge today. The murder in Zhu Yuan's eyes trembled. Ha, you. Wu Huang laughed disdainfully. Fine. I will kill you today, destroying any hopes that your Zhu clan may have. Boom. Under the attention of the countless excited gazes both inside and outside of the Saint Remains domain, Zhu Yuan and Wu Huang's figures finally broke out of the 10,000 feet tall green wave, heading straight into the clouds. The instant Zhu Yuan and Wu Huang's figures broke through the 10,000 feet tall green wave and dashed into the clouds, the atmosphere outside and inside of the Saint Remains domain abruptly reached its boiling point. Countless were stupefied. No one had expected that there would not be one, but two who broke through the final obstacle. Moreover, they were Wu Huang and Zhu Yuan. Of course, the crowd was still able to accept Wu Huang since everyone knew of his reputation. Zhu Yuan, on the other hand, was completely unbelievable. After all, Zhu Yuan was only at the Heaven Gate stage. Who could have imagined that amongst the many geniuses in the Saint Remains domain, a Heaven Gate stage practitioner would be the one to reach this stage? Outside the Saint Remains domain, there was only surprise on the faces of the representatives from the various factions. Zhu Yuan should be from the Great Zhu Empire. The Great Zhu whose lands were taken away by the Great Wu Empire through some kind of plot. I thought that they had been wiped out by Great Wu. Can't believe that such a talented individual would come from Great Zhu. His future possibilities will likely be limitless. Zhu Yuan's talent may indeed be extraordinary, but it's a pity that he was not patient and tolerant enough. Wu Huang would not let him off for choosing to ascend the peak at such a time. Yeah. Wu Huang is definitely not someone you should offend. Numerous whispers could be heard, but it was clear that everyone was not too optimistic about Zhu Yuan's situation. Wu Huang was just far too famous, his strength practically immeasurable. In comparison, although Zhu Yuan was a splendid dark horse, he was still weaker overall. Zhu Yuan is rather capable. Several envoys could not help but remark when they saw this, some admiration in their gazes as they looked towards Zhu Yuan. However, this clearly did not include Zhao Pan. He indifferently glanced Zhu Yuan's figure and said, his talent is not bad, but it's a pity that he's in a rush to seek death. Mu Wuji tapped pipe and said, young people should bravely advance, creating a path to the heavens from impossibility. Zhao Pan smiled coldly. I'm afraid his path is more akin to the road to hell. Hints of mockery could be heard in Mu Wuji's voice as he spoke. Weren't you the one who said that Zhu Yuan was completely incapable of competing with Wu Huang and the rest? Yet, he has now managed to ascend the peak at the same time as Wu Huang. Zhao Pan, is your memory really so bad? Zhao Pan's eyes hardened as he disdainfully said, one may be able to somehow cheat their way through the steps, but a life or death battle will be next. That brat will undoubtedly die at Wu Huang's hands. Mu Wuji smiled faintly. I'm just afraid that you're going to lose all face again. Zhao Pan sneered chillingly. Since you have such a high opinion of Zhu Yuan, I feel that you should get ready to collect his corpse. Zhu Yuan was naturally unaware of the various happenings on the outside. At this current moment, he seemed to be falling within the clouds. His figure slowly landed, down towards mists. The seemingly endless stone steps had already disappeared. The steps to the mountaintop are gone. Zhu Yuan's eyes flashed. As he fell, he suddenly realized his feet had touched solid ground, and the surrounding mists began to swiftly disperse. Only now did Zhu Yuan discover that he was standing on an incomparably large, white jade plaza of sorts, which clearly lay upon the peak of the Saint Mountain. This place is the peak of the Saint Mountain. Excitement blazed in Zhu Yuan's eyes. After so much painstaking effort, he had finally reached his goal. His eyes suddenly narrowed slightly as he looked to the front where the mists were swiftly dissipating, revealing a figure in golden robes standing with his hands behind his back. The figure coldly looked over, endless killing intent surging around him. Who else could it be but Wu Huang? Their gazes met in the white jade plaza, killing intent spilling in every direction. I truly never expected this, back then. I could not even be bothered to give you a single glance, and now, you've come all the way here to stand on the same stage as myself. Wu Huang's voice was indifferent, without the slightest hint of any emotion. I do feel a little regret now. I should have taken things more seriously in the past, and completely destroy your Zhu clan. If I had done so, it would have saved me a lot of trouble today. Back when Great Ju was at its weakest, if he had given King Qi just a little more support, the latter might have overthrown the Great Ju royal clan. However, the him from back then had believed sending 4 alpha origins would be enough. Who could have imagined a single thought would make such a difference? The crippled dragon in his eyes had steadily advanced one step at a time, until he reached the very same stage Wu Huang now stood on, and now even posed a threat to him. I feel that your regret will grow a little more after I kill you. Ju Yuan grinned, revealing a set of eerily white teeth, his killing intent bare for all to see. Ha, kill me? You? The crippled dragon of the Ju clan. Wu Huang was expressionless, his gaze overflowing with unconcealed ridicule and haughtiness. Ju Yuan laughed. Where does a petty thief like you find the face to act as if you're in the right? Petty thief. Mockery was rich in Wu Huang's voice. It seems that the pitiful worm you are really believes you're that sacred dragon. Ju Yuan shook his head. I do not care whether or not I truly am that sacred dragon. He smiled faintly as he continued, Wu Huang, that fateful event caused me to suffer endlessly over the years. However, I do not believe that it was all bad. Similarly, that fateful event allowed you, the Crown Prince of Great Wu, to have smooth sailing life, never suffering a single setback or defeat. Likewise, this may not have been good for you either. A dark and cold expression emerged in Wu Huang's eyes. Ju Yuan's speech made him feel an uncontrollable rage, because he had heard these very same words from someone that mattered a lot to him. Wu Yao. Wu Yao may speak such words to me, but how dare you, crippled dragon of the Ju clan? Moreover, how dare you use the same tone as her? Wu Huang closed his eyes, Genesis Qi madly churning around him, only gradually calming down a long while alter. However, anyone could tell that this calm was only temporary. Like a volcano, it was being suppressed for now for the sake of a more terrifying eruption later on. Ju Yuan, after I kill you, I will personally lead an army to exterminate the Great Ju Empire. Endless killing intent spilled from Wu Huang's voice, causing the air to freeze. Ju Yuan raised his eyelids, his hand grasping around the heavenly Yuan brush as it grew with a flash of light, the sharp brush tip slanted at an angle towards the ground. He stared at Wu Huang with a gaze that was similarly bone-bitingly cold. Wu Huang, your Wu clan stole my blessings back then, took an arm from my father and caused my mother to lose a great deal of her lifespan. I will make sure to properly clear all of these debts with your Great Wu Empire one by one. And now, I will be taking the first one from you. Rumble. Dark gold Genesis Qi exploded. Ju Yuan's clothes flapped, icy and deadly murder in his eyes. Ha ha. Wu Huang laughed heartily at the sky. The likes of you. Ha ha, fine, fine. I will cut you down here today, and use your blood to prove to Wu Yao whether or not I am the true dragon. Rumble. Scarlet red Genesis Qi erupted like a volcano, shaking the space around it. Under the countless watching gazes both inside and outside the Saint Remains domain, 2 boundless murder-filled auras violently clashed like a storm on the white jade plaza. The silhouette of a dragon seemed to rise behind them, roaring at the heavens. The only difference was that Wu Huang's dragon was gold, while the dragon behind Ju Yuan was blood red. The faint roar of a dragon echoed across the white jade plaza, as 2 boundless murder-filled auras ferociously clashed. The iciness that rippled outwards froze even the air itself. Dark gold Genesis Qi erupted from Ju Yuan's body without reservation, as he icily stared at Wu Huang. In the next instant, Genesis Qi exploded beneath the former's feet, sending his figure rocketing forward. In a short span of a few breaths, he appeared in front of Wu Huang. With a jerk, the heavenly Yuan brush powerfully thrust forward, snow-white hairs whistling through the air as the brush tip ruthlessly approached the latter's throat. The reflection of snow-white hairs rapidly grew in Wu Huang's pupils, but he stepped to the side, avoiding the sharp brush tip. Ju Yuan, since when did you have the courage to take the initiative against me? Wu Huang's chilling voice sounded. Ju Yuan was expressionless. One could only watch as the brush tip shuddered, the snow-white hairs transforming into numerous white threads. Every thread gave off a sharp aura, seemingly covering the sky and land as they shot towards the fatal spots on Wu Huang's body. The attack was clearly merciless. Wu Huang coldly snorted. His foot slammed into the ground as Genesis Qi burst out like a rising sun. Countless white threads struck the scarlet-red Genesis Qi, but every single one was ultimately flung backwards. Wu Huang's eyes were ice-cold. His hand made a grabbing motion as rays of light began to emerge, and a dark red spear appeared. Carvings of flying golden crows decorated the spear's body while it emitted a searing Genesis chi ripple. Golden Crow Spear, a high-grade black Genesis weapon. The moment Wu Huang's hand closed around the Golden Crow Spear, his aura turned even more berserk and violent. With a furious roar, the long spear whipped through the air, leaving after images behind it as it was powerfully swung down towards Zhu Yuan. A long scar began to melt on the white jade floor. The heavenly Yuan brush blopped horizontally above Zhu Yuan's head, a loud clang resounding from the collision of brush and spear. Sparks flew as their gazes clashed again, murder spilling into their surroundings. Wu Huang's spear was withdrawn, its tip pointing towards the ground at an angle. Genesis chi began to converge at the tip of the spear, culminating into a flare that was several feet long. The flare first appeared as green, before ultimately turning purple. The purple flare pulsed, so sharp that no words could describe it. In fact, even the ground was easily cut open. "Watch me pierce your lousy brush." Wu Huang's icy voice sounded as his body shot forward. The purple flare pulsed as it sliced across the ground, splitting the floor open wherever it passed, the insides of the cut smooth as a mirror. Aura flare technique. I know it too. Zhu Yuan's eyes flashed when he saw the pulsing purple flare on Wu Huang's spear. With an icy chuckle, the brush tip's snow-white hairs shivered as Genesis chi gathered towards it, forming a pulsing flare. His flare likewise appeared green at the start, before gradually turning purple. There were two levels to the aura flare technique, which were based on color, green and purple. Initially, Zhu Yuan had only managed to reach the green level of the aura flare technique, but as his strength continued to rise, he was finally able to push the power of the technique to the next level. His figure also shot forward, meeting Wu Huang in the white jade plaza several breaths later. Berserk Genesis chi unfurled, showing that the two figures had poured all their power into their attacks. They forced their speeds to the limit, making it practically impossible to clearly see either figure. One would only be able to see two after images colliding time after time as purple spurted in all directions, shredding the surrounding ground. Anyone could clearly tell that both parties were merciless in their attacks. Countless gazes both inside and outside the Saint Remains domain were tightly glued to ferocious exchange between the two figures on the Jade White Plaza. In a short span of a mere dozen breaths, they two individuals had clashed over 100 times. The crazed rapidness nearly causing many onlookers to be unable to catch their breaths. Everything in the vicinity was a complete mess. The ground was torn up once again, as two blurs shot at each other. Purple flares pulsed from the spear and brush as they ripped through the air, powerful colliding a split second later. A clear clang sounded, followed by an extremely berserk shockwave. The figures were caught in the shockwave, their bodies blown away by the powerful force. Zhu Yuan slid dozens of feet backwards, the brush tip leaving a line of sparks on the ground. On the other hand, Wu Huang was only pushed 10 feet back, quickly stabilizing his body with a sweep of his spear. It was clear that Wu Huang had taken the upper hand in their clash. However, Wu Huang's expression did not look happy at all, but instead grew increasingly dark and stormy. He still clearly remembered how Zhu Yuan was unable to receive even a single punch from him when they had just entered the Saint Remains domain. But now, Zhu Yuan was already able to push him so far. How could this not infuriate Wu Huang? Of course, buried in the depths of his anger was a sliver of fear that Wu Huang would never admit to. The rate of Zhu Yuan's growth was clearly leaving the former no choice but to begin taking him seriously. A breath of white was slowly spat out from Zhu Yuan's nose. He gazed at Wu Huang's dark, stormy eyes and said, 2 years ago, you, the great crown prince of the Great Wu Empire, were pretty unreachable in my eyes. 2 years prior, he had still been unable to find his channels. Let alone Wu Huang, even Qi Yu had been an untouchable existence in Zhu Yuan's eyes. Yet, in a mere 2 years, this cultivationless youth was now able to go toe-to-toe with the crown prince of the Great Wu Empire. Wu Huang, you've had the lead for so many years, but I was still able to catch up in such a short period of time. What do you think this means? Zhu Yuan smiled faintly. It means that I am even more outstanding than you. Wu Huang's gaze was chillingly sinister, staring at Zhu Yuan as if he was about to devour him, while the Genesis chi around him began to rage violently. However, he ultimately closed his eyes and took in a deep breath, slowly suppressing the anger inside. Wu Huang frostily asked, Zhu Yuan, are you planning to anger me with your words to find an opening? Don't even dream of it. I know that I used to look down on you in the past, however. I will make up for all of these mistakes by paying with your life. Your foundations are strong, but unfortunately, at the end of the day, you're just a Heaven Gate stage practitioner. While I am already at the Alpha Origin stage. At the final word, scarlet red Genesis Chi shot out from the top of Wu Huang's head like a beam of light, dashing straight into the heavens, and began to burn the sky. Golden Crow Sky Burning Chi. In the wake of Wu Huang's thunderous shout, a glowing silhouette suddenly gathered within the scarlet red Genesis Chi, slowly turning into an enormous golden three-legged crow. Flames burned around the golden crow, causing the temperature to rise. This guy's Genesis Chi is also grade 5. Zhu Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at the barely visible golden three-legged crow. This Genesis Chi had definitely reached the realm of grade 5. Zhu Yuan knew that he could not withdraw at such a time, and immediately took a step forward. Dark gold Genesis Chi erupted, golden light filling the horizon. Everyone watched as the dark gold Genesis Chi converged into a translucent giant dark gold python. The giant python coiled behind Zhu Yuan as it released a deafening roar towards the heavens. Golden Crow Sky Burning Chi, Golden Crow's Heavenly Inferno. Howled Wu Huang as the golden three-legged crow swept forth. Scarlet red flames began to burn on its body, distorting the space wherever it passed. Even the ground below was charred black. Countless gazes both outside and inside the Saint Remains domain gasped as they watched. Though they were not present in the battlefield, they could still sense the tyrannical power of Wu Huang's attack. The golden three-legged crow descended like a giant sun, a terrifying sight to behold. Zhu Yuan's expression was grave as scarlet red rapidly grew in his eyes. He spat out a breath of air as his hands came together, and a low voice sounded in his heart. Omni Python Chi, Python swallows the heaven. The python hissed as it shot forth, crashing into the golden three-legged crow a moment later, its giant mouth opening and swallowing the crow whole. Zhu Yuan watched this happen with a fierce look in his eyes. Wu Huang, let us see which is stronger, your golden crow burning sky Chi, or my Omni Python Chi. This video will end here.